Chapter 6. Awaken. The maiden awoke in the softest bed she'd ever known. Its pillows were like an angel's down and blankets soothing against her raw flesh. The air was cool, crispy, and perfect for sleeping. As she opened her eyes, it seemed to be midday due to the angle of the light sloping in front of a half-drawn window. The rays faintly illuminated the room, which seemed more like a shrine, now that the maiden looked around. There were multiple tables whose surfaces were adorned with offerings. A group of flickering candles, dried flowers, and a tiny carved idol were amongst the piles. Faint incense curled in the air, carrying the scent of sandalwood. On the far end of the room, the maiden even gazed upon a portrait of herself. In it she was smiling, walking through the streets of Rose Hollow, in a scene that the maiden was sure never happened, although she wished it was so. This portrait was a window into a world that should have been but wasn't. Her eyes continued to scan the room, and she jumped when they fell on Elthrendil, sitting in a chair next to her bed. The weapon master was puffing on a pipe as his fingers turned an ancient tome. His hair was tied into a bun which the maiden hadn't seen before. There were also bandages that crisscrossed his left arm. The maiden had never seen him wounded before. "Always the trees lose their leaves just as the winter winds first blow," Elthrendil said. "Never early, never late, and never to be rushed." "Hello to you too," the maiden croaked. Her throat was raw, her mouth dry, which caused her words to come out like nails being run along a chalkboard. She sat up weakly, every part of her body groaning in exertion. The maiden glanced at her arms, which were bone-thin, near the point of emaciation, which prompted her to examine the rest of her form. Once again she found herself a shell of what she used to be. Not that the maiden had been outwardly a physical specimen. Lithe would have been the word she'd have used before, but now it was as if all the life in her had been drained away. As the maiden pulled back her blanket, she saw her own ribs which clung tight to her flesh. "What did they do to me?" the maiden asked. "You're an archer aiming at your competitor's target," Elthrendil chided. The body was healed quicker than a hummingbird's heartbeat. Your mind, however, took far longer to heal. "How long?" "A wink in the grand scheme." "Elthrendil, please, no more." 3 years, maiden." His voice was flat, without any of the sing-song cheeriness or fey happy-go-lucky attitude to which she'd become accustomed. He was serious. That, in and of itself, was terrifying from Elthrendil. The maiden's reaction must have portrayed her true feelings because the man reached over and laid a gentle arm on her shoulder. "Do not fret, maiden," he said. "Remember that all things happen in good time. I don't have words, nor do you need them. Words can hardly capture the true depth of the world. They are blunt instruments. Surely axes weren't made for performing surgery." He gently drew one of the maiden's hands upward as he held it. The maiden felt Elthrendil's warmth as her breathing settled. "I guess," the maiden said as she brushed hair away from her face. Usually she kept her hair short, but now it flowed from her like a great spider's web. There was so much of it. "I don't know how Ishin manages," the maiden thought. That's when her mind suddenly drifted to Ishin. It had been 3 years since she'd seen Ishin last. 3 years since. The maiden shivered at the thought of the Colosseum. That nightmarish experience, the damning answer of the high gods, and so much more began to flood back to her. The worst part, though, was the thought of Ishin being without her for so long. She brought her flowers. Did nobody bring her flowers at all? They want to see how long they can keep ataxia contained. Perhaps they'll be able to keep you neutered and docile long enough to win this war and bring the traitors to heel. Quellian's words shot into the maiden's mind. No, she thought. Ishin and the other high gods didn't do this on purpose. Surely not. They didn't put me in a coma for a few years just so they could dread. That is the only word that could describe what was happening to the maiden. It coiled in her stomach like a venomous serpent, its poison spreading through her veins. Her chest tightened as though the air itself had turned hostile. A chill seeped into her limbs, making her fingers tremble as the back of her neck prickled with that same unnatural chill. That chill of fear and angst created a crawling sensation, like ants scurrying along the underside of her epidermis that made her skin feel foreign. It was as if something unseen had reached inside her, rooting its claws deep, transforming her every heartbeat into a drum that shook the foundations of her soul with each rhythmic beat. Did Ishin lead her to slaughter? "The war?" the maiden asked. She didn't know what she wanted to hear. "Still raging," Elthrendil said. "The high gods continue to lose ground." "Oh. I hope your skills with the sword have not atrophied in your slumber. You shall need them for what comes next." "Next?" Chop. Screaming. Blood. Betrayal.